So the premise of this one, right? We're going to review it using the same three criteria that I've been using for the other DLC scenarios: um, the uniqueness, the replayability, and the cool factor. So the premise of this one is, what if the Onin War basically never happened? And so the old families are still in charge. You know, the idea is they're still in charge, they're way stronger. And, you know, the heroes, I think it said in the description, the heroes that we usually know, such as the Oda, the Takeda, the Uesugi, they have to quote unquote lay low, something like that, you know. So the heroes are kind of either subordinate to the old ruling families because the Oda Wars never happened, or they are, you know, they have one castle starts, their forces are shrunk, and they have to deal with these um, big families that are still in charge. They're in charge now. They're not weakened, quote unquote. So that's the premise of it. You know, you're meant to either pick one of these bigger, older families who has a couple of cool guys underneath them as subordinates and use them, or you play as you know, an Oda start, a one castle Oda start, which is I don't know, supposed to be different from from a different one castle Oda start. I don't know. So let's get into it. The uniqueness, right? So this starting date is a little tricky because I love the idea. Okay, Koei has done this in the past in their Romance of the Three Kingdom games, so I might make a comparison here there, a few of them to that. So in Romance of the Three Kingdoms, there's a comparison like this. There's a really good starting date where it's like, what if the coalition leaders, after the coalition, stayed in control? They didn't relinquish their subordinates. So Yuan Shu stayed in control of the Sun family. Um, Yuan Shao stayed in charge of Cao Cao. Liu Bei was a subordinate to Gongsun Zan, that kind of deal. So this kind of echoes that premise, the same idea here. The guys, you know, but the thing about this idea, well, it sounds cool. The execution is it's trash, and I don't really know what Koei is supposed to do about it. I don't know what Koei is supposed to do about it because what could they do about it? You know, I think just it just doesn't work. It sounds good, and it just doesn't work. So let me explain. In this game, because all the clan leaders that you're talking about here, for example, the Akumatsu Daimyo, right? Let's look at the stats: 62, 71, 69, 71. Okay, the Yamana Daimyo: 64, 62, 60, 62. Let's check out the Hosokawa: 65, 60, 50, 66. Harumoto is a little bit better, but he's got some subordinates under him. But 57, 46, 72, 56, right? Let's look at the guy I clicked on, Yorinori. Yorinori, who I actually gave some traits to kind of spice him up in this one. Yeah. 42, 27, 54, 72. Okay, so do you see the pattern? Ogasawara Daimyo, 66, 71. It's so frustrating. It's 38, 38. So the difference between this and the Three Kingdoms scenario that I mentioned is that those coalition leaders, Gongsun San, Yuan Shao, even Yuan Shu to some extent, in the Three Kingdom games, they have something going for them on their own. Okay? They have something going for them on their own. These old heads, the old heads who are still in charge of these families, who might have not all, some, might have some interesting officers, such as, you know, Akamatsu still having, what's his name now, EA here, the Yamana, the Yon Mana, as I like to call them, having the Imago subordinate to them, stuff like that, okay? Harumoto having the Chosokabe in addition to the Miyoshi, they're still weak. So the very top is still weak. And they're all weak. And they're all mediocre. And they're all interchangeable from each other. Okay, so all that is to say, it kind of feels the same. You know that they're not, because Koei didn't address the daimyos themselves at the top. It kind of feels samey, and it's gonna feel kind of samey. Um, you know, it's a tough spot because again, it sounds good, but the execution, unless you change the daimyos, me as a player, I'm not going to play the Toki, for example, and say, well, it's the AI. They might have the Imago, they might have the Miyoshi and the Chosokabe, but they're not going to put them in charge. You know, they're just going to have their standard preset settings. So in this example, Haramoto is probably the strongest one because he still will have he'll still have a couple of Miyoshi here and there, and hopefully he has the Chosokabe. Yeah, it's just a Chosokabe skin right over. But most of these guys are not going to put their best guys on the field. They're not immediately going to edit their castles and put the best man in the best job. That's just not how the AI works in this game. And because Koei didn't go in there and say, listen, let's change these guys up, you know, if I was playing as AI, if this was an AI force, you guys know they've got Mitsuhide buried in the depth chart. They've got Dosen buried in the depth chart as well. Kicho's buried here. I mean, there's some good officers, but they're not in charge of any castles. It's just a standard setup. So basically, they didn't take any steps to have the AI have the strongest people possible in charge of the strongest places. It's just a copy paste of where they usually start. So in some cases, that's serviceable. You know, Kunichika is still here because he's the daimyo, so he's still here. Nagayoshi is over here because when they're subordinate to the Hosokawa as normal, he's here. But in other cases, there's talent that's just buried. And as that talent improves, maybe they'll get promoted to castle spots, but they probably won't. And they probably won't survive. So it kind of kills any uniqueness that it has, because what happens on a wide scale, what happens is that this map is just full of mediocre, samey hordes. No matter who you play as, that's who you end up fighting. You end up fighting mediocre, kind of same flavorless mediocre hordes is what you end up fighting against. So no matter where you go, that's just how it ends up. Um, you know, Harumoto takes over. Maybe Harumoto takes over the western spot here, and he absorbs these other blobs, these other mediocre blobs, to create a super mediocre blob. But Nagayoshi already does that. The Miyoshi already do that most of the time. They take over this anyway. If you play as Harumoto, or you have Harumoto on the map, and you turn off the event where the Miyoshi take over, then Harumoto does that anyway. You know, there's a high chance that he takes over that anyway. That's what happens 9 times out of 10. So nothing's really changing over here. It's just a battle of super mediocre, flavorless blobs. One absorbs the other to create one large one that has, you know, by the time you get to the end of the game, whichever super large mediocre blob is left, that one's going to have a lot of talent in a couple of castles. But ask yourself this: how is that different from any other run? How is that different from playing any other run where it's like, yeah, an Ieyasu type force has taken over the eastern portion of the map, and so they have so much talent that they end up putting some of their talent in charge of some of their castles. That's no different. So what I'm saying is that for the late game, it doesn't count. It doesn't matter for the late game, because the mid to late game is always the same. It's for the early game where you can make that distinction, where you can really say fighting this Akumatsu is going to be very different from fighting this Yamana force, because in this Akumatsu force, we've got the Ukita clan that they're going to be able to bring out against you. You know, did I say Imago for them? I meant these guys over here, who are not the Imago, by the way. It's the I keep calling them Imago, Kyogoku. So fighting the Kyogoku clan, maybe you'll have to fight the Imago. Maybe you'll have Nagamasa in here. He'll be in charge of a castle at some point or something like that. But it's, again, you're dependent on the AI actually expanding, because they're not just going to change their castle lords. You know what I'm saying? So you can't expect the AI to make the best moves to take advantage of the fact that they've got talent buried everywhere. You can't expect them to. And in some cases, like the Ogasawara, they're a completely empty shell. They're just a big hollow blob for no reason because the Ogasawara don't really have anybody except for Yoshikiyo. So playing a Shingen doesn't change. You're gonna destroy this guy no matter what. It doesn't. Nothing changes for the experience. Is what I'm trying to say. It feels the same. It feels like Dynasty Warriors type experience because now everybody's really mediocre, even at the top, which is worse. Okay, and the example that I gave, Ieyasu's got half of the map and he's got all these different talent, but he's also Ieyasu. Okay, at the end of the day, the daimyo is also Ieyasu Tokugawa. He's a very strong character. When you fight this super blob, whoever it may be, and they have their huge stack, they're going to be very mediocre stats, interchangeable from the other guy. Each guy is faceless. So, to me, the unique factor, I'd give it a 2 out of 5 for that reason. It's a huge hit. It's a huge hit. So, honestly, that's the bulk of. I had to really explain that as best as I could because it's the bulk, the main issue with this. It sounds great, but it really, as soon as you play this, this was the first one that I tried, and as soon as you play that, you start to see the problem. And I even tried to remedy it because I had a feeling. I had that feeling just from playing this game a lot, from playing Koei games a lot, I should say. You can usually spot if there's, if there's rot present at the center of the apple, the pretty looking, appealing apple, you can get a sense for, you know what, that might be a rotten apple. That apple might be hollowed out, might have a worm in it, might have eaten everything inside. So, the idea sounds good, but it's not different, and it's actually worse. You can play a more interesting Uesugi just playing as the Uesugi normally. Having a one castle start, the premise of having a one castle start is just not interesting because everyone that you're fighting is still the same. They're just generically weaker versions of what you fought everywhere else. So what's the point? I mean, I just don't see it. It's another, Yoshimoto, like, take the Oda here, yeah. What about Yoshimoto? You have Yoshimoto here, he's going to march towards the capital, and you're playing as Nobuhide, and now you have, okay, well, what about him? I can do that in other scenarios. Stopping Yoshimoto's march to the capital. Hey, there's a lot of other starts as Nobunaga or Nobuhide where that is a tough premise. Well, you're surrounded by these couple. Yeah, but they're mediocre. It's the same as having other mediocre kingdoms. You know what I mean? It's just, it's not good. Although I do like seeing this. Anyway, so yeah, uniqueness. I'd say 2 out of 5. Replayability. It's the same. 2 out of 5. I really have. I don't know. There's just replayability is just not good either. It's really on the player to get something out of this. Now, I will say this: you can make this interesting, but it's really on the player. And this is why I say I don't know what Koei could have done other than not make the starting date if they weren't going to put the effort in. Okay, you have to protect your players against their worst impulses. Okay, that's on the company. It's not on me. It's not on me. This is where I was going with my Yorinori rant earlier. It's not on me to keep myself from min-maxing the game. Okay? If I'm playing this, and my first thought is going to be, I'm going to get rid of Yorinori, so, how do I do that? Well, I'm going to get here, I'm going to click on Yorinori, I'm going to marry Kicho. Awesome. Ult of the dagger right away. And then I'm going to retire. And I'm going to get Dolson in charge. Guy's buried in this is the best daimyo. I'm strong. Now I'm going to make sure Mitsuhide gets a castle right away. We got to get Mitsuhide up there. Kicho's a samurai leader. We got to give her a castle. You know what I mean? Let's kick out Itetsu here. No, I'm just kidding. But yeah, I'm gonna start making the moves. I'm gonna get really strong. The AI can't keep up with me. They're not gonna do any of that. So again, they're just going to remain flavorless until one of them dominates the others. But you're playing the same as any other run at that point, except it's worse because the guy in charge is worse. So Koei should have accounted for that. They should have accounted for that. It's not on the player. Okay, who's not going to do this? You're not just going to say, okay, let me just start playing. Let me keep Yorinori Toki, and let's make a run with him. Let's do something, I don't know, absolutely crazy. Get rid of Dosen and maybe Mitsuhide and lower our. I'm just gonna lower my own power level to try to make it interesting. You know what I mean? Nobody's gonna do that, right? So it's on Koei. You have to. Companies know this, and they know this. Like you have to, you have to find ways to curtail the players' reach, their agency a little bit, because given their own volition, most people will optimize the fun out of their own game. They will min max the fun out of their own game, and and you'll do it without even knowing that you're doing it, because you're just trying to win. You don't know that. You just, you know what I mean? This is any game. You're doing it because you're trying to win. So most people don't realize, okay, what can I get away with, or they just don't want that. They don't want to play in that discomfort. Again, it's not on the player, it's on the company. So the premise is good, but the replayability, it's just, to me, it's the same. I would give it a 2 out of 5. It's just not great. Everything, it feels very, very samey. You can find some nuance. There's a little bit of nuance on this map with like a one castle start Hojo. You know, for one clan start Uesugi. But again, it's just pointless because your neighbors are still very weak. It's still the same thing. They just have a couple of more castles, you know, and they might have some talent, but it's AI. They're not going to use the talent. So, you know, again, I say Hojo because I think you're at war with Imagawa, so that's at least something in this timeline. And I feel like there might be one or two spots where there's something like that, where it's like, hey, you know, this guy over here has maybe one thing or two things, but on the whole, it's bad. It's a step backwards. It's crazy to say, but it's a step backwards. So the coolness factor. The last thing, the coolness factor. Okay, believe it or not, I would say the coolness factor, I got to give it 2 ratings. I mean, the coolness factor is a 3 out of 5. 3 out of 5. The idea is still cool. I like the idea. Um, like I said, you can play as one of these mediocre clans, and maybe there's some fun maybe to be had there. Where it's like, I'm a mediocre clan, at least at the surface level, and you can have a little bit of fun until you start to get your power guys ranked up and they start to take over, and then you're just playing as those guys. I've talked about this a lot on the channel. What's the point of playing, a weak clan and absorbing powerful officers when you're just basically replacing your force with the powerful officers? But in that beginning, there's a little bit of fun, right? There's a little bit of fun in that beginning. So, um, this scenario, however, I got to give it 2 ratings. If you're willing to edit it and put some work in, which I know you could say the same about all the other ones, but in this one, you could really give these old heads some real power with some editing and try to make them strong thematically. And, the coolness factor can be, you can cap it at 5 out of 5 if you're willing to put a little bit of work in, you know? So go in there, change the ranks of some of these guys. Now EA's buried here in the ranks. He's got nobody. The Dosen we already saw. Mitsuhide, move the ranks up, maybe move the castle lords around, maybe give the daimyo, increase their points, or give them some abilities, some traits, which is what I did. I felt like finding traits that could be plausible. You can find a way to give these old clans some power. Then you could have something. You could really have a show, especially if you could give them some power based on their regions. Maybe try to give them flavor, man. Okay, it's bland. This is bland grilled chicken. Okay, it's just grilled chicken everywhere, again and again. Now, grilled chicken's great for protein, but you do get tired of it. After a while, you're like, fuck, grilled chicken and broccoli again? It's, dude, you get tired, you get worn out. You got to spice it up a little bit. So if you're willing to get in here and spice up these clans a little bit, this scenario can actually be pretty good. As usual, we need you to do Koei's work for them, okay? Because this is kind of a very, 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 very copy paste job. It's very copy paste. It's almost like all they did was change the emblems. I don't know that for sure, but that's how I feel. I feel like all I did was just change the emblems. So yeah, coolness factor, 3 out of 5. I would say up to a 5 out of 5 if you're willing to put the work in. You can get some crazy. This is a really cool sandbox. It's really cool. It's just the execution of it is really bad, and that kind of kills it. Instead of it being a sandbox where like, oh, look over here, we've got some cool castles over here, and there's some toy sand soldiers over here, and there's a battlefield over here, and this part of the sandbox, it's like sand. It's like, here's some bland sand everywhere. There's no inspiration. It's just like, here's a generic mound of sand, and here's a generic mound of sand, and here's maybe not a generic mound of sand, but you've seen this mound of sand before, many, many times. So that's the main issue of it. If you're willing to put the work in, though, this could be a great one. If anybody has any ideas for how to make this a great one, let me know in the comments down below. I will be replaying this one again. Like I said, this is a project for me. I'll keep trying to find a perfect, or as near perfect as I can get, challenging start for this one. So, yeah, hope you guys enjoyed this review. It's frustrating. This one was a frustrating one. Again, the idea sounds great, and you slowly start to realize it. It's like, oh, okay, this is not. There was no effort put into the execution. But anyway, guys, like I said, leave me a comment down below. Hit the like button, subscribe to the channel if you haven't already. I'll see you guys on the next one. Until then, take care, everybody.